Welcome to the farm.
Welcome to the farm. I'm Justin, and I'm still waiting on some parts for the grapple build that I'm currently working on. So while I'm waiting for that, we're going to turn our attention back to the case again and see if we can't get that working a little bit better. And I have some exciting news on that front. We have a replacement carburetor for it. Now this is just a universal carburetor. It's supposed to fit a bunch of different tractors, a bunch of different brands. The SC was on the list of carburetors, so hopefully we won't have to do too much modification to this to get it to work on that tractor. But I think what we'll do is we'll pull the old carburetor off, bring that over to the bench, and see if we can't get any parts we need off of that onto here and get this ready to mount to the tractor. Okay, so we have our old carburetor off the tractor now, ready to move some parts over to here. A couple things I know that we need to move is obviously we got to try to get the fuel elbow onto the new carburetor. I got to get this little nub for the throttle linkage onto this linkage here, which I'm not sure if I have parts to do that or not. The very first thing I want to check is to see if my mounting bolts for the old carburetor work with the new carburetor. And they do not. All right, I'm gonna go check my bins here and see if I have something that will work with this thread pattern. All right, so I checked my bins. I got a couple screws here, some 1/4 screws. I'm gonna go ahead and see if it'll fit these threads. Just kind of giving a quick look. Looks like it should. Oh yeah, threads right in. So that will at least get me to the point where I can put this together. I really don't like that it's a screw head. I kind of would prefer it to be a bolt, but I can always pick one of those up later. So now we got that solved. Let's go ahead, take this elbow off of here and see if we can't get this mounted on the carb. Okay, that fits on pretty good. I think the next step is to take this little nub off the old carb and see if we can't get it onto the new carb. So I got the old fitting off. It'll fit in that hole right there, which I think is where I need it to go. Unfortunately, it won't thread in. I got to see if I have a little nut or something for this. I'm guessing I don't. Looks like it might be a 1032, and I'm pretty sure I don't have any 1032 nuts. So I had a 1024 nut, does not quite thread onto here, but I think the number 10 is correct, so I do think this is a 1032. I'll have to go into town and get a nut for this. But I did open the bag of little parts, and I did find that it came with studs that we can, in fact, install in the carburetor and then use the nuts on the top to bolt to the downshaft on the intake. So let's go ahead and install those. So I got these just kind of hand threaded in for right now. I'm going to tighten them down a little bit. So I'm going to do the double nut technique. I'm going to thread one nut down a little bit. Take the second nut, thread that on top of it. And I can take those two nuts, tighten them down together. And now I should be able to tighten the stud right in. And then I can take the tension off the two nuts. Stud's nice and tight in. You can see this one I can loosen up. This one I cannot. So the last thing I want to do before I run into town and get my little nut, well, there's actually two things I need to take care of. One, I'm going to adjust the arm here, make sure that this point on the carburetor is the same as this point on the existing carburetor, so that way my arm swing and everything is exactly the same on both carburetors. So I'm at about 3/4 of an inch center a pin to center a hole. And this one is just a little bit off, like a 1/16 of an inch. So we'll go ahead, loosen that up a little bit. Tap that down. That looks pretty good. Tighten our lock nut back down. And we'll double check. That's pretty close. I think that's good enough. We'll make that work. The last thing I want to do now is we're just going to kind of bench set all the different screws and settings. We'll refer to our handy dandy sheet that came with the new carburetor. The first thing I want to do is we want to hold the throttle in the closed position and set the throttle stop screw at 1.5 turns from completely closed throttle position. All right, so that is the full closed throttle. And now we just need to turn this until it touches the stop pin right there. It's a half turn, 1 turn, half turn. And we have just a little bit of an air gap around our little plate there, our butterfly valve. So I think that's set. Then we need to set the idle adjustment needle at 1 full turn to open. So that should be this guy here. Bottom that out. Half a turn. Full turn. Then our main jet right here should have 1.5 to 2 turns open. So we're closed there. Half a turn. 1 turn. 1.5 turns. Okay, so I think we have all our preliminary settings all set. We got our throttle position set, we got our idle speed set, we got our main jet set. I think that's all good. I'm not going to do anything with the choke right now. I don't even have the choke cables or anything on the tractor. I'm just going to run that by hand once we try starting it, just to get the thing going. But I think the next step now is I have to run in town, see if I can find a nut for this to get this installed before we put this on the tractor. All right, so I'm back from my run into town. The screw is actually a 12/24 screw, and for those of you who don't know what those numbers mean, the first number, the 12, is the size of the actual screw itself, and then the 24 is the amount of threads per inch. So this is a size 12 stud with 24 threads per inch. So I picked up a nut for it. We can go ahead and hopefully get that screwed on. So I was afraid of that. The nut is just slightly too tall. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to the belt sander, knock a little bit of that nut off so I can get this to sit up a little bit higher and see if I can't get it to grab. All right, so I took off some of the top of the nut here. Took off a little more than I wanted to, but I think it's going to work out okay. The issue I was having is trying to get the nut between the arm of the throttle linkage here and then the set screw for the idle speed. Not enough room in between that space for this nut. So hopefully now that I took a little bit off that top, it'll sit right underneath that screw and I'll be able to thread my throttle linkage post right in. Perfect. All right, with our little throttle nub installed, I think we're ready to go ahead, put this on the tractor. All right, so we got our gasket. Slide that right over. Washer. Lock washer. Nut. Okay, we got clearance on our throttle, clearance on our choke. Well, our new carburetor is on the tractor. Fuel line's hooked up, throttle cable's hooked up. Like I said, the choke, we're gonna hold off on. I'm just gonna do that manually while we crank it over. Let's go ahead, get the fuel turned on, and see if this thing holds fuel. So before I turn the fuel back on, I'm gonna actually drain out the sediment bowl. Last time I opened it up, I could see a bunch of stuff floating in there, so I'd rather not send stuff through the new carb. All right, so I've had the fuel on to the carburetor for about 10 minutes now. Nothing's leaking. That feels so good. Just that alone is a victory, and I'm happy about that. But I think we should go ahead, put the battery back in the tractor, give this thing a couple cranks, and just see if it holds fuel. Choke is on. So the carb is holding fuel when it's just sitting still, but as soon as I start cranking, it's starting to dump fuel out of the intake. And when I put my hand on top of the exhaust, I can kind of feel suction in on the exhaust. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. All right, so I tried readjusting the main jet here just to try again. Maybe I didn't have it right. I don't think that's my issue, but we're gonna give it a shot again and see what happens. Well, we got a step in the right direction at least. The carburetor on the tractor just sitting there is holding fuel and it's not running out of the carburetor. So that's a plus. We're moving in the right direction. You know, I'm not a mechanic. I'm just doing this for fun in my barn with a dirt floor, just trying to learn some stuff and tinker. I have a couple ideas on what I think might be causing it. I could be way off base. One of my ideas is the timing could be out, and maybe if the timing's out, the intake valve's open while the piston's coming up, creating pressure and actually pushing the fuel back out. Another idea I have is maybe we have a bad seal between the head and the manifold, the intake manifold, and as the piston's coming down and sucking in, it's leaking air through that gasket instead of getting enough pressure through the carburetor to suck the fuel up. Those are the two ideas I have off the top of my head. If you guys are watching and you guys have any ideas on what could be causing it or what I should look into, please drop me a comment, let me know. I could really use some help on that. I'm going to grab the manual, do some reading, and see if I can't figure something out. Until then, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys found this interesting, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.